Hello and welcome to Meet Utah Candidates. My name is Lloyd Brunson. I'm host of the show. We'll be listening to candidates' thoughts and opinions about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Federal Reserve System. This is the second show of 4 featuring Utah's candidates in the race for governor, attorney general, the U.S. House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate race. We're also featuring 2 presentations on the Constitution and the Federal Reserve System. The candidates' hectic schedules made it completely impossible for us to present them in any organized fashion. So if you want to see additional candidates, you're going to have to figure out a way to watch the 3 other shows. We're about to see a whiteboard video presentation on the proper role of government, written by my friend Joe Fabiano. This is truly exciting. You're going to enjoy this immensely. And Joe will be shown later in the show, presenting this in his own words.
Do you believe, understand, and live by the Constitution of the United States? If not, you should. This information is very important to all U.S. citizens. Allow us to explain some basic information about government. There are 2 main schools of thought. One is to have as little government control as possible, and the other is to have total government control over every aspect of human life. Then there are many positions in between those 2 schools of thought, which is where we find most Americans. Let's first consider total government control. The government makes decisions and laws and uses force or punishment for those who do not abide. This type of government is called totalitarian, and heads of this type of government are called kings, tyrants, emperors, dictators, and warlords. Before 1788, most all governments were of this type. There were some modified versions of totalitarian government, such as in England, where they had a parliament that enables some input from a group called lords and some representation for the common people. In reality, the king ruled with guidance from his advisors, and most of the people obeyed his laws. In 1788, 7 years after the Revolutionary War, the Constitution of the United States was approved and accepted by the sovereign states and became the law of our country. Our Constitution was very different from any government in the world because it was based on having very little government. The federal government was then charged with the responsibility to protect the people's unalienable rights, given from our Creator, along with 17 other specific tasks outlined in the Constitution. The people of the United States were not only free and well organized, they were also protected from their own government through the Constitution. By 1905, 117 years later, the United States had become the most prosperous nation in the world. What does this tell us? When people are free from totalitarian government, they're happier, personally successful, prosperous, and have a greater standard of living through advances in technology, science, medicine, and arts. The people's responsibility under our Constitution is to be law-abiding, to elect good, honest people with wisdom, intelligence, and experience in many diverse fields. People with a great appreciation and understanding of the principles used to formulate our United States Constitution. Imagine if all citizens understood the Constitution and would elect representatives who upheld the Constitution. Unfortunately, that's not how it is. But it can be. Here's a simple rule to follow. Any law passed which allows our government to do something that you as an individual don't have the right to do, that law is unconstitutional. The only rights you can delegate to your representatives are the unalienable rights you have, not the rights you don't have. You don't have the right to take possessions from one group of people and give them to another. That is stealing. It is wrong to knowingly seek to get your representatives to pass laws that are unconstitutional. That action promotes a totalitarian government. We're better than this, and we can do better. You can find out if your representatives are passing good or bad laws by going to libertasutah.org and clicking on Legislator Indexes. It lists all the laws passed by the U.S. legislature for the last 3 years. It shows the name, the House bill number, nature of the law, who did or did not vote for the bill, and a constitutionality percentage score. Study the constitutionality score, and you'll find that 52% of the people in Utah vote for totalitarian government. If Utah is off track, what does that say for the rest of the United States? You can make needed changes by voting for candidates that pledge to repeal unconstitutional laws at all levels of government. When we're able to get Utah back on the road to prosperity, we can help the rest of our country do the same. Will you help?
Wasn't that terrific? That has inspired me to want to pick up the Constitution and reread Amendments 5, 9, and 13. You might want to check those out yourself if you haven't already. They really relate to the video that you just saw. Now we're going to hear from the candidates. We're going to start with hearing their thoughts and feelings about the oath of office.
I almost get chills. It doesn't expire, and I've taken it twice. I took my first oath on the plane at West Point when I was 17 and entered the Corps of Cadets. And 4 years later, when I graduated on May 27, 1987, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And when I look back on that oath doesn't have an expiration date. It never expires. And that's what's really led me to this point to seek public office. And I think that oath we take is so unique and so powerful. And the 87 words we say as military officers, 87 words because it's a little longer because we talk about our rank in there, are critical to understanding, for the public understanding of what it is our responsibilities are and what we're expected to do. So can I read that oath? I, Donna McAleer, having been appointed an officer in the United States Army in the grade of second lieutenant, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I'm about to enter. So help me God. And that oath is very similar to the oath you take in the Senate and the Congress. The only difference is the section of which the office is. And the importance of that oath is it is an oath to defend really the greatest idea in history of government. It's not to a state, it's not to a country, and it's not to the government itself. It's to the ideal of the government.
Well, the way I understand, the way I feel about the oath is that first and foremost that I would be swearing to defend the Constitution, which is the major part of the oath, against all enemies. And then, of course, it also means that I will faithfully fulfill the duties of the office. And the duties of the office are pretty broad, but most importantly, I think that it's important that I represent my constituents in the manner that they would want me to represent them. So that's the high priority for me.
But what if your constituents want you to do something that goes against what you feel the Constitution requires?
Well, obviously I'd be swearing to uphold the Constitution, and so that would be my priority.
It requires that, when I read a piece of legislation, if there is something in it that violates what's in this document here, it requires that I say, no, I will not vote for that, which means I would be voting no most of the time.
To support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
I've had that privilege of raising my arm to the square and taking that oath 3 times in my life. And I think it boils down to just a real simple thing. It's a sacred oath between me and the people to uphold our Constitution and ensure that the principles that our founding fathers had put together, that we adhere to them. And it's almost a spiritual experience to be able to do that. And it's one that you feel the responsibility and the overwhelming gratitude that you can do this, defend this great Constitution of our country.
What is the penalty for breaking the oath of office? How do you feel about the idea of adding under penalties of perjury to the oath of office?
Certainly I would hope that anyone that is charged with defending the Constitution would understand it. So I wouldn't have any problems with that.
I think that also, if someone does not uphold that office, they should be removed from office, if not by vote, by legislation.
Well, they certainly get away with it a lot, but they shouldn't. They should be removed from office if they're not going to uphold the Constitution, that they took that oath. And they need to take that oath seriously. I don't know how you can swear an oath to uphold something that you have no idea what is even in it. It's an inspired document.
Penalties of perjury. I think that's a pretty good one. Especially given in this day and age, we have so much money that influences our government. The Citizens United decision was an incredibly detrimental one, in my view, that allows untold dollars that are completely opaque to influence political campaigns. And I think money also has the potential to corrupt people. And so I kind of like that idea.
Well, I think when we look at cowardness in the military, I think when we look at breaking the Constitution with regards to what we commit, a murder, or we do those type of things, and when it takes our freedom away, I think there is a penalty. And I think that there's redress that happens through the Constitution and through our laws that we have in place today. And it clearly, there's, freedom is not free, and you can't ever forget that.
Now we're going to spend a little bit of time on the Federal Reserve System. One of the most important powers enumerated in the Constitution is the power to create money. In 1913, our government gave that power to a private group of bankers known as the Federal Reserve System. This next video shows us what has happened because of that power being transferred from our government to a private group of bankers.
An elite group of people and the corporations they run have gained control over not just our energy, food supply, education, and health care, but over virtually every aspect of our lives.
We have a privately owned central bank system disguised as a government-owned system.
There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
What the Federal Reserve Board does, nobody knows what they're doing.
Who actually made that decision to hand out $1 trillion that way? $500 billion. Who made that decision?
The Federal Open Market Committee.
All right, well, the Constitution says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law.
This money is not drawn from the Treasury.
We can always print money.
Is it safe to say that nobody in 1913 contemplated that your small little group of people would decide to hand out $500 billion to foreigners?
We just saw what is happening because our government gave up its power to create money. Now we're going to see what President Lincoln did to save the Union by utilizing that precious power to create money.
1 month after the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, the first shots of the American Civil War were fired here at Fort Sumter, South Carolina. But Lincoln needed money to win. Lincoln sent for an old friend, Colonel Dick Taylor of Chicago, and put him on the problem of financing the war. Taylor put it this way. Why, Lincoln, that is easy. Just get Congress to pass a bill authorizing the printing of full legal tender Treasury notes, and pay your soldiers with them, and go ahead and win your war with them also. So that's exactly what Lincoln did. In 1862-63, he printed up $450 million worth of the new bill. In order to distinguish them from other banknotes in circulation, he printed them in green ink on the back side. That's why the notes were called greenbacks. With this new money, Lincoln paid the troops and bought their supplies.
During the course of the war, nearly $450 million worth of greenbacks were printed. Lincoln understood who was really pulling the strings and what was at stake for the American people. This is how he explained his rationale.
The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest creative opportunity. By the adoption of these principles, money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity.
A truly incredible editorial in the London Times explained the central banker's attitude towards Lincoln's greenbacks.
If this mischievous financial policy, which has its origins in North America, shall become indurated down to a fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts and be without debt. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its commerce. It will become prosperous without precedent in the history of the world. The brains and wealth of all countries will go to North America. That country must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe.
Does the United States government today have the power to create money? In other words, is the government, the United States government, creating money?
We have given that power to a group of bankers that we call the Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with the federal government, nor with any kind of reserve. There's nothing there. Wouldn't be a need for taxation or borrowing if we would print our own money, as we're having the Federal Reserve do for us now. However, with the Federal Reserve doing it, we have to pay them for all that money.
It belongs to Congress to create money, not the Federal Reserve. We need to get out of the Federal Reserve. It's foreign bankers mostly, and everyone they create increases our debt. It's the bankers' property. So we're we're using currency that is totally bogus currency.
Wow.
And when you look at the creation of money with regards to the Federal Reserve System, it brings up a lot of questions. And the first question at the top of the list, and I don't care whether you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whoever you are, the transparency of the Federal Reserve needs to have the light of democracy shining on it. We have to know what's exactly going on there, because we're all led to believe that they do print the money and they print it on our behalf, but we really don't know at the end of the day.
It really is true, folks. If we don't understand that and we don't address that issue, all other issues become impossible to solve. We need help. And where are we going to get that help besides ourselves? This is a tough problem. Well, the Constitution contains the answers to all issues if we study the document. The Declaration of Independence gives us clues and answers as well. The signers of the Declaration, all of them, said that they could not have established this, the greatest country in 5,000 years, without the help of God, without the help of the divine hand of providence. And I say to my friends that don't believe in God, it's irrelevant. Whether you believe in God or not does not change the truth, the fact that believing in Him works. Now, how do we interpret the Constitution? Thank you. There are 4 references to God in the Declaration of Independence, and there are 2 references to God in the Constitution. So how do we interpret the Constitution? The Declaration of Independence tells us how to do that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have unalienable rights from our Creator. For 4.5 months, the signers of the Constitution deliberated and debated and fought over every word within the document and its connected definitions. And they still all signed on to Article 7. Article 7 tells us who the God of the Declaration of Independence is, and who the God of the Constitution is, and who the God of this country is. Those 2 words are there in Article 7 telling us who it is. Our Lord. The 9th Amendment is the voice of God, in my opinion, telling us how to interpret the document. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. No construing the document in favor of federal government at the expense of the unalienable rights of the people. That is the voice of God. Now, what are we doing here today? Are we here to vote for our most favorite person to become a senator or a governor or a congressman? Are we here to support the defenders of the Constitution? We all have an obligation to defend our liberties. The Constitution is the most valuable tool, the most valuable weapon in defending our liberties. If we open up the document and we read the 9th Amendment, then we can understand Amendment 5. Amendment 13, involuntary servitude is against the law in every state. Amendment 5, you can't have your property taken from you, we're not just talking real estate, and have it redistributed at your expense. We need people in Washington reminding our representatives that they have a contract. It is against the law to be liberal. It is called the oath of office. It is called the obligation, the implied oath to the Constitution of the United States. It is called thou shalt not steal. God bless you all. Thank you for all you do. I'm excited about this next part of the show. My friend Joe Fabiano is going to present to you something very informative and very exciting. You're going to enjoy this.
You have been watching candidates for various offices in government being interviewed on the Constitution of the United States. The purpose of this is to enable you to evaluate their knowledge and dedication to that document. My name is Joe Fabiano, and I'm here to talk on why that information is so very important to all of us citizens of our country. Please allow me to explain some very basic information about governments. There are two main schools of thought relative to government. One is to have as little government as possible, and the second is to have total government over every aspect of human life. Then there are many schools of thought between those two schools. Let's first consider total government, but we must understand what government is. Government is force, and it makes laws, and then applies that force to ensure all the people under their rule obey those laws. This type of government is called totalitarian. The heads of this type of government are called kings, tyrants, emperors, dictators, warlords, etc. Before 1788, most all governments were of this type. There were some modified versions of totalitarian government, such as in England, where they had a parliament that enabled some input from a group called lords and some representation for the common people. In reality, the king ruled with guidance from his advisors, and most people obeyed his laws. In 1788, 7 years after the Revolutionary War, the Constitution of the United States was approved and accepted by the sovereign states and became the law of our country. Our Constitution was very different from any government in the world in 1788 because it was based on having very little government, as in the first school of thought. The federal government was then charged with the responsibility to protect the people's unalienable rights, which we receive from our Creator, plus 17 other specific tasks outlined in the Constitution. Then the people of the United States were not only free and well organized, they were protected from their own government through the Constitution. In 1905, 117 years later, our small United States became the most prosperous nation in the world. Conclusion is, when people are free from totalitarian government, they are happier, personally successful, prosperous, and have a greater standard of living through advances in technology, science, medicine, and arts. The people's responsibility under the Constitution is to be law-abiding and to elect good, honest people with wisdom, intelligence, and experience in many diverse fields, with a great appreciation and understanding of the principles used to formulate our United States Constitution. It would be great if all the citizens of our country understood the Constitution, so they would be a lot wiser about who they elect to represent us in our government. However, that is not how it is in these days. But here is a simple rule to follow when you are not very familiar with the Constitution. Any law passed by our government that is doing something you as an individual don't have a right to do, that law is unconstitutional. The only rights you can delegate to your representatives are the unalienable rights you have, not the rights you do not have, such as taking possessions from one group of people and giving them to another group of people. That is stealing, no matter who does it, and it's wrong. It is also wrong to seek to get your representatives to pass laws that are unconstitutional. That action promotes totalitarian-type government. You can find out if your representatives are passing good or bad laws by going to a website at libertasutah.org and click on Legislator Indexes. It lists all the laws passed by the Utah State Legislature for the last 3 years. It shows the name, the House bill number, nature of the law, who did or did not vote for the bill, and a constitutionality percentage score. Study the constitutionality score, and you will find out that 52% of the people in Utah vote for totalitarian government. And Utah and the United States are in trouble because of that. You can make needed changes by voting for candidates that pledge to repeal unconstitutional laws at all levels of government. When we are able to get Utah back on the road to prosperity, we can help the rest of our country to do the same. Now I am asking, will you please help?
As you study the Constitution, do you find things that surprise you and excite you and sort of like the scriptures, it's like, wow, I never knew that was there? Have you had that experience of study?
I have. Of course, I've read it a number of times over the years, but one of the first ones that really excited me, because I see how we're misusing and abusing this particular thing, is the very first statement in the actual Constitution, which is all legislation can only be brought forward by Congress. Nothing the president does can be turned into a law. The problem is if nobody stands up and says, no, you can't do that, it becomes law anyway. 60 days after an executive order is issued, it becomes law if the senators or the congressmen don't stand up and say, no, you can't do that.
16 trillion, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Taxes and interest from shore to shore. The Federal Reserve owns the company store.
This concludes our second show of 4. Remember, study the Constitution, and if you want to know how to interpret the document, go to the second clause of the Declaration of Independence, connect that to the 9th Amendment, the Interpretation Clause, and you'll be on the right path. Thanks again for watching the show, and we hope you join us in our other shows. Until then, God bless.